and the Greater Dayton Area League of Women Voters presents Meet the Candidates, your chance to learn about the candidates running for office in the November election.
Hi, I'm Patty Skilkin. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of the Greater Dayton Area, and I'm here today talking to the candidates for the 39th House. We've got Mr. Jeffrey Dalton, Mr. William Pace, and Mr. Fred Strahorn. To start, I'm going to give each candidate an opportunity, 2 minutes, to tell us a little bit about yourself, why you're running, what you think your qualifications are, and why you think you're better than the other guys. Let's start with Fred, Mr. Strahorn.
Well, thank you, Patty. I'm State Representative Fred Strahorn, and I'm running for re-election in the 39th House District. I have served in the legislature for 12 years and am an experienced legislator who has fought over those 12 years for the best interests of my constituents and the folks in the state of Ohio. Over that time, I've fought on a variety of issues, from education funding to good jobs in the state of Ohio and a fair tax system. As well, I know how important it is to make sure that we pass policy that expands opportunity for people in the district and in the state, also assures broad prosperity across the state, as well as making sure that government works for you and not against you. So I'm asking for your vote on November 4th. Fred Strahorn.
Thank you, Mr. Strahorn. Mr. Pace, same question to you. 2 minutes to give us your answer.
I'm William Pace, a native Daytonian, born and raised in the 39th District of Ohio, graduate of Dayton Public Schools, Wilberforce University, and graduate student in public administration at Ashford University. I earn my living as a marketing producer and insurance sales. My folks, Charles and Nellie, moved to Dayton in the 50s. They had heard that Dayton was a place to get a job, raise a family. Since then, we have seen much decline. I want to restore the 39th District back to a prosperous district where people want to come to work and to live. The land is rich. We have to sow the seeds for a prosperous 39th District. I will fight relentlessly to bring back jobs to Dayton, strengthen our companies, and yes, in the true entrepreneurial spirit, develop businesses from scratch. A district with a strong commerce is a district full of life and energy.
Thank you, Mr. Pace. Jeffrey Dalton, you're last. Give us your story of why you want to run.
Okay, I'm Jeffrey Dalton. I've lived in Dayton my whole life, except for the time I was serving my country. I'm a naval veteran who served during Desert Storm. I attended college at Sinclair Community College and Wright State University, where I majored in business administration and economics. I'm a Catholic, and I belong to St. Albert the Great Parish in Kettering. This is my first campaign for elected office. I've been a treasurer for a previous candidate that ran for state rep, and I was a fundraiser for a mayoral candidate. I believe we need change. My top priority is to bring business back into Dayton. Since 2000, 30,000 manufacturing jobs have left the area. The only way to get these jobs back is to offer tax incentives to the companies to get them back to Dayton. Other states have used the same type of tactics to lure the jobs away. Another thing I would like to work on is educational funding. If we get the jobs back into Dayton, then we'll have more tax revenue and we can increase educational funding. I said, we need to change. I want to work hard for you. I want to be that person. Thank you for your consideration on November 4th.
Thank you. Okay, our next question. There's a big debate going on in the country about environment and climate change, renewable resources, fracking. Mr. Pace, I'm going to start with you first time this question. What are your feelings about that? Do you think it's the sky is falling, or is it not?
I do think it's a time that we have to change the course which we are born. It's obvious that the current situation is not working for American people. And I think we have to explore new possibilities, new alternatives to find our way back to a more prosperous time for American people. The American people are really suffering, and we need to do everything we can possibly do to empower each and every citizen.
Thank you. Mr. Dalton, same question. How do you feel about all those issues?
The environment and fracking in particular, I'm strongly against fracking. I believe it leads to polluted water. We're seeing that with Lake St. Mary's and Lake Erie. We need to take care of this problem. It's also causing random earthquakes and sinkholes. So the environment is a top priority and should be taken seriously.
Thank you. Mr. Strahorn?
Thank you, Patty. I think it's an interesting issue in the broad topic of environmental climate change and things of that nature and things that impact that. It's odd to me that it's so polarizing given the number of scientists that say that climate change is real. But let's just take, for instance, the polarization. And part of the problem is people believe that it either exists or it doesn't, and they don't really think about anything in between. Even Bill O'Reilly says it's healthy for the country to have a cleaner environment, whether climate change exists or not. So there's middle ground in there for people to understand that a cleaner environment is just important in and of itself. The move away from fossil fuels and having a more balanced mix of different kinds of energy sources is, even though some of the fossil fuels are going to exist for a long time, they're starting to deplete. With the exception of coal, will be around for a much longer period of time. So they're going to get more and more expensive over the course of that time. And so again, whether you believe climate change exists or not, there are really a bunch of other really great reasons to figure out how to mix up our energy diversity, as well as how to try to make the environment more cleaner, the water, the air, because those have health impacts on people, particularly children who are more susceptible to those things. So whether climate change exists or not, and I do believe it does exist, for everybody who's still on the bubble on whether that's true or not, there's a lot of other reasons in between that for people to be concerned about making sure that we have a cleaner environment.
Thank you. Mr. Dalton. We're gonna get a little bit local here. Your district covers all of Montgomery County, the district that you three gentlemen are running for.
No,
No,
it covers the city of Dayton except for Old North Dayton and Jefferson Township.
Oh, I've been given bad information. Okay, tell us again, where does it cover?
The city of Dayton predominantly, except for Old North Dayton, the northeast portion of the city,
Okay.
And Jefferson Township.
And little bits of
Trotwood.
And little bits of
Townview.
Trotwood.
yes.
Well, I'm certainly glad you guys know where you're running, because obviously I didn't. Let's talk local though. Like what we see here in locally is we see Austin Landing just booming, and it's pretty far out there. It's it's halfway to Cincinnati, and yet the city of Dayton itself is still struggling. Can that be fixed? What do we do about that?
I do believe it can be fixed.
Okay, but it's Mr. Dalton's turn. And you get to tell us in just a minute.
Oh, I have plenty to say on that.
I think it can be fixed. We need to bring more business in, to bring more revenue in, which then we can have more police patrol in the streets, because crime is crazy in the city of Dayton, and people just don't feel safe downtown. We need the people to feel safe so that we can bring the businesses in.
Okay, Mr. Strahorn?
I
are your thoughts?
certainly believe it can be done. I'm going to differ on why people don't want to be downtown. I think they may feel unsafe, but I don't think the actual facts or crime statistics support that. The city of Dayton downtown is a very safe downtown to be in, quite frankly, and people that I've talked to who live down there say that. So there might be a misperception about it that's creating an issue. But having said that, I think what you find Dayton is doing a better job of is creating housing downtown. There's a demand for that, and people are beginning to move back downtown, particularly empty nesters. And so as that occurs, that's what's going to bring business. Business tends to look at, how many people do you have with a certain income in a certain radius, and that's how they cite where they're going to locate their businesses. And so as you amass a larger population of people in the core, then you'll start seeing business respond to that, particularly depending on the income ranges of those folks. I think Dayton is sort of on track to do these things. It's still got to figure out how to do the entertainment piece and how to make, how to program the city to have this vibrant lifestyle. And I think you'll see more and more people begin to move back in the city, and I think you'll see businesses respond to that.
Thank you. Mr. Pace, he's just twitching, wants to get on this answer. It's your turn.
Thank you. I believe that we need a prosperous district. And you'll hear me using that word frequently throughout this campaign, because people want to live where things are thriving, where there are businesses, amenities. For example, I live on Salem Avenue. There used to be 3 major grocery stores there: Liberals and Kroger's and Stump's. Now I have to go into Harrison Township to get my groceries. I have nothing against Harrison Township, but wouldn't it be great and if people had the amenities right there in their neighborhoods? I remember the Miracle Lane Shopping Center. We didn't have to go out somewhere, wherever. We could just go to Miracle Lane for our shopping. I remember downtown Dayton days. I remember that. You would hop the bus, drive downtown. We could go to Bierman's, Lazarus, Dunnenfeld's. We had our choice. And that's what I want to give to the people today, a choice in their own district. If you have to drive out to wherever, then you might as well live wherever. Most people want to have the shopping destinations, stores in their own neighborhood. And that's what I'm going to be fighting for, because people have told me that in on the streets, at the gas pumps. They don't want to go drive a long distance to get to a grocery store. They want to be able to go right in their own neighborhood, in their own district. And that's what I'm going to fight for the people.
Thank you. That was kind of a trip down memory lane. I grew up in North Dayton. I remember all the same places you do.
It was just a few, it wasn't that long ago.
No, it sure was. Well, feels like a long time ago. Okay, moving on. Mr. Strahorn, you're going to be first. What do you think about minimum wage? There's a lot of talk about raising the minimum wage. Give us your feelings.
I think raising the minimum wage is a great idea. When you think about it historically, when it passed the first time years and years ago, it was a great idea. A lot of people supported it, right? There's no reason that the same proportions shouldn't exist over time. If you don't index the minimum wage to some type of cost of living or something that grows, inflation, over a very short period of time, it loses the purchasing power of that worker begins to diminish. And so when people have more disposable income, they buy more products from companies, and it's a win-win for both the wealthy and for corporations, as well as the individual worker. So they're not just continuing to work themselves to death, have to work 2 jobs, tread water, and never really grow. And so it's a good idea. It's taking hold in other communities around the country, and I think everybody needs to give it a really strong look. I personally believe that there should be a really good look at some type of indexing, so that we don't have to keep revisiting this every 10 or 15 years. In the meantime, that worker has lost a lot of purchasing power and is trying to make ends meet in an environment where the cost of everything else, particularly essential things like fuel and housing, continues to soar. So those things are out of whack. We need to make sure we put those things back in whack for workers. And at the end of the day, it's a win-win for everybody. And I think that's what's lost in the debate, is that corporations and employers benefit because they have to sell their products to somebody, and those folks have to have enough money to purchase those things. So.
Thank you. Mr. Pace, your turn.
Thank you. I definitely believe people should have the opportunity to increase their wage. to a certain point. Sometimes people get so involved that they keep increasing the wages of employees to the point where the companies can no longer afford to have them. So I believe that I would support increase of wages. But I believe we need, if I may expand upon this, an abundance of jobs paying different wages so that people have the opportunity. I remember not so long ago that you could always, if you wanted a job, you could get the paper, open it up, and you could have a job maybe at the end of the day. May not be the job you wanted, may not be paying the wage you wanted, but you could always work your way up to a higher wage, a better job. So I would support an increase in wage, yes.
Thank you. Mr. Dalton?
From an economic standpoint, no, because when you increase the worker's wage, the company's going to increase the product price, so it's just a wash. Personally, I like raising the minimum wage. It will give people more spending power. It will throw more dollars out onto the streets, and it can be used for various things. It'll work if the companies don't raise their bottom dollar. You know, they have to keep their profits. So personally, yes, I'd say raise it.
Thank you. All right, we're going to start with Mr. Pace this time. Let's talk about education.
Okay.
Education's in kind of a state of crisis everywhere. There's been talk about promising every youngster a preschool education, getting one earlier start at age 2 or 3. How do you feel about that?
I think that's a great idea. I think the earlier we start educating our children, the better. I like to think of the line like it takes a village to raise a child. And I like to apply that to it takes a village to educate a child. And it's not only the parents, the teachers, it's the community, it's the neighbors, all play a key role in education. And I think sometimes people take that for granted, their importance in educating a child. So I think there's a lot of work that we need to do. That's obvious, but it must be a more collaborative effort in education, and that's what I think I will be fighting for, more of a collaborative effort in educating our children.
Thank you. Mr. Dalton, how do you feel?
I feel starting them out that early is just too early. I think the regular kindergarten through high school is just fine. What we need to do is get classroom sizes smaller so there's more one-on-one interaction from the teachers to the students. My daughters, we sent them to private school at first. Now they're in a STEM school, and they're getting that more one-on-one, and they're getting what they want. One wants to be a scientist, one wants to be an engineer, and this school is science, technology, engineering, and medicine, and it's more designed for what they need. And more parents need to look at these types of options out there than just Dayton Public Schools or the charter school or the private school. There are lots of options.
Thank you. Mr. Strahorn?
Patty, let me ask you, is the question specifically about pre-K or is it generic?
Pretty much about pre-K, okay. But you go where you need to go.
Okay, thanks. I would say that my vision of universal pre-K is that it's available to everybody. It may not be necessary for every parent to put their kid into pre-K if they have some alternative that they're pursuing that the kid is on track with. So I don't necessarily believe it has to be compulsory. If something else is going on in the development of that child that substitutes for that, but I believe it should be available for every kid that's pre-kindergarten. The other part of that is, the reason that's so important is because we know so much about brain development now that we know that a lot of the growth and the synapses firing and the connections that happen very early in a child's life, and once you lose those windows, you don't ever get them back. And so that has a lot to do with the capacity and IQ that a kid develops over time. And so to stimulate that, it really does make a difference to have that happen in an organized, quality pre-K environment. And so early childhood development is huge. The data is very supportive of making sure that that's available for kids. And so I really do support it, because once we lose those windows, we never get those back, and those things compromise a child's ability to go further and further and further. So we want to make sure that they're armed and equipped to be as successful as possible, and that early child development is a big part of that.
Thank you. I could do this all day, you know that. If you're elected, Mr. Dalton, I'm going to start with you. What would be your dream legislation? What would your number one priority be?
To bring businesses back into Dayton with higher paying jobs, not just the restaurant with the minimum wage jobs. We're talking bringing back some manufacturing jobs, more high-tech jobs, information technology type jobs. They've got Tech Town downtown, and they've got 3 businesses around town that do that types of things. We need more of that type of business to come back to the area. Thank
you. Mr. Strahorn?
That's a great question, and it's a hard question because there's so many things that we need to do. I think employment is important. I think access to health care is important. I think we need to stop tax shifting the responsibility for paying for the infrastructure from the most wealthy to working people. But if I had to pick one, it would probably be to get the education piece right, education funding, the standards that we use, the resources that are available to schools, because that to me is the cornerstone of everything else that occurs in our society. And if you don't get that right, it leads to a lot of bad expenditures that we have to make. It leads to a lot of unfulfilled lives. And so we have to make sure that we get that cornerstone right. Better educated people are going to have better employment opportunities, statistically going to take better care of their health and have access to quality health care. They're going to make enough money that they can pay their fair share of the taxes and still live a quality life. And so when you get the education piece right, everything else tends to fall into place in terms of crime and being able to convey certain concepts to your population so that you get good policy and you get a good political structure. So I would say I would focus, and have focused to some degree, on trying to get the education piece right, dealing with phantom revenue in the formula, getting a formula that the amount of money that we spend on education correlates to what we've actually defined as what it takes to give a kid a quality education. So I'm pretty big on that one.
Thank you. Mr.
I want to
Pace?
make sure I got the correct question. Give it to me once again.
Your number one priority, should you be elected, what's your big dream?
My number one priority would be to see that the 39th district is a prosperous district. So I'll be fighting for jobs training, job education, because we have to, a city, a district with a strong commerce is a district full of life and energy, and that's critical to the 39th district. I want this district to go back to the way it used to be, a rich, prosperous district where people, like my folks, they wanted to come here because they had heard this was a place you could get a job. This is a place you could raise a family. That's what I'll be fighting for.
Thank you, and a fight worth having. In closing, I want to thank these candidates for taking time to be here with us. We've heard some interesting answers and some great ones. And I want to explain about the League of Women Voters. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan grassroots political organization. We never ever support or oppose a party or a candidate. We do, however, fight for voters' rights. So everybody get out and vote. If you're voting absentee, please be sure, do not make little check marks or little X's in the bubble. You've got to fill in that round bubble for your choice in blue or black ink. Put the right postage on it, sign it, and send it in immediately. It needs to be there sooner rather than later. Other than that, I don't know if I'm supposed to say anything else. I think that's about it. Oh, you know what? If you have any questions about your polling place or ID, call the league office, 228-4041. We can answer almost everything. We didn't know where your district was, but usually we do. Thank you for being with us today. Bye-bye.